Yeah, it all seems pretty horrible, especially if they threaten you or threaten your family, and you're not sure if they're from another planet or not. I think it's a very effective way to shut UFO witnesses out.
Well, let me tell you, Jim, I've had visits from government agents, various alphabet-type organizations connected to the work that I do here, and they are... even though they seem easygoing and very nice guys, there is no question about it, Jim. I'm just talking about normal government agents here. In black suits, you know they're carrying, they've got a sort of a serious, we're here and you don't want to mess with us kind of attitude about them. And even though they're very nice and very calm, there's no question about the fact that there is an aura of intimidation that you could cut with a knife.
You don't want to mess with these guys, even if they don't have these eyes that bug out of their head or a weird kaleidoscope unit that they train on your eyes. You know, I mean, yeah, you're saying they're intimidating enough.
I'm saying just regular government agency.
Even without some of the dramatizations that the men in black sometimes do, these guys are bad enough to fool with.
That's exactly right. So, I mean, encountering what you seem to be. Let's get down to it. I mean, casebook. There are some cases that you obviously believe are the best stories or the best evidence or might be genuine. What would they be?
Well, I don't know. There are many good cases. One of the most interesting one that always kind of sticks in my craw happened to a Dr. Hopkins in Maine in 1976. And he had been hypnotically regressing an alleged UFO abductee. And he was met or contacted by a man in black who was bald, had dead white skin, and no lips. The lips were simulated with lipstick.
Oh.
Okay. This man in black discussed the UFO abduction case that the doctor was digging into in a monotone. He sounded like a robot. And then he apparently used ESP. He said, doctor, you have a dime and a penny in your pocket. The doctor reached in, and that's what he did have in his pocket. The man in the black told him to hold the penny in his open hand, and as the doctor looked at the penny, it turned silver, then blue, and then it slowly dematerialized. There was no chance for sleight of hand or legerdemain. The doctor was holding this and looking close while it slowly dematerialized.
Wow.
Now, this man in black asked Dr. Hopkins if he knew of another famous UFO abductee, actually Barney Hill.
Oh, yes.
He had recently died from a heart attack, and Hopkins responded that he did. And the man in black told him that it was no heart attack that had taken Barney Hill, but the same thing had happened to Barney Hill's heart that had happened to that penny in the doctor's hand. And
wow.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, we are at a break point. Jim, when we come back, I want you to tell that one more time.
Oh, really?
I like penny stories.
All right.
So we're going to go through that one more time. The story of Dr. Hopkins. Do you recall yesterday when Colonel Corso said the alien bodies rapidly decomposed? Ed Dames said disappeared. And did you just hear what Jim said? We'll be right back. Men in Black tonight. Going back now to my guest, Jim Keith. Or am I doing that a bit prematurely? No, I'm not. Back to Jim Keith. Jim, the story of Dr. Hopkins is one of the coolest stories I've heard in a while, and it meshes with a lot of what we've been talking about. Would you please tell it one more time?
Sure. One of the reasons I like the Dr. Hopkins story is it wasn't anecdotal. When I received it, it was done in very much detail, and this detail was received from Dr. Hopkins' kids, because Hopkins was not talking after this happened, but it took place in Maine in 1976, and Hopkins had been doing some UFO research on his own and regressing an alleged UFO abductee when a man showed up at his doorstep, and this was a man in black. This guy was bald. He had very pasty white skin, and apparently he possessed no lips. the lips seem to have been painted on with lipstick. And oddly enough, that's a detail that's repeated in other stories where the facial features are simulated.
Sounds almost like a mime.
Yeah, could be, or a clone. But this man in black talked about with the doctor about his research, and then he told the doctor that there was a dime and a penny in the doctor's pocket. He reached in, and that's what was there. The man in black instructed the doctor to take the penny in his open hand, and as the doctor looked at the penny, with no sleight of hand, this all took place quite slowly. It turned silver, then blue, and then it dematerialized. And the way that the doctor expressed that this had taken place was that he felt the absence of the weight of the penny on his hand. This man in black asked Hopkins if he had ever heard of a well-known UFO abductee, Barney Hill, who had recently died from a heart attack. And Hopkins said that he had heard of Barney Hill. And the man in black informed Dr. Hopkins that in fact this was no heart attack, but the same thing had happened to Barney Hill's heart as had happened to the penny in Dr. Hopkins' hand. And that was the last that Hopkins was ever involved in UFO research. He burned all of his tapes, got rid of all of his books, and like I said, the only reason we know about this is because his kids were willing to talk about it.
All right. It would be useful, and we may not know what exactly Dr. Hopkins was working on when this occurred.
In fact, I have the name of the abductee who Hopkins was hypnotically regressing, but I just don't have it at my fingertips. I believe it's in the book.
All right, so he was regressing somebody, and we can imagine that he was getting close to information that obviously they did not want out.
Right, and that's a familiar theme, of course, with the Men in Black, is that people find out about the secret of the UFOs, or they see a particularly spectacular sighting, and then they are encouraged in no uncertain terms to keep their mouths shut about it.
Well, you know, I can imagine that if somebody like that came to my door, assuming that I lived through the initial sighting of this thing, and it did that to me with a penny in my hand, I would be inclined to go along with Dr. Hopkins. Now, it's easy to sit out here and for the audience to say, wouldn't have stopped me. Baloney. If that occurred to you, you'd think 25 times when something occurred in your very own hand and you were told, well, that's what happened to somebody else's heart, and the obvious direct indication is this could be your heart.
Sure, you know, us fearless UFO researchers and researchers into conspiracy, you don't really know how you would react when push came to shove, and there was a truly significant threat.
Well, I think I know how I'd react. I'd cave big time, assuming I lived through the experience. That would say to you, stop now, or you're not going to live to do any sort of further investigation whatsoever. You're simply going to die.
Yeah.
That seems to be the message. All right, well, that was a fascinating case. What else have you for us?
Well, you know, really any number of things, but one aspect that I would like to talk about is sort of UFOs created by government. And I think there are a lot of reasons to believe that the U.S. and maybe other governments have been, in fact, since the early 1950s, testing these kind of exotic aircraft that the Men in Black might want to shut people up about. And
all right, here's a mystery for you, Jim.
Sure.
You've seen, I'm sure, coverage of the recent lights over Phoenix.
Oh, yeah, sure.
I had a newspaper person down in Arizona sent me a story of his, indicating that some flight or squadron of planes had been flying over Phoenix that night, and this explains everything. The problem is that nobody, the military, the flight controllers at the Phoenix Tower, saw anything on radar. And so it's a pretty good example. I mean, here you've got an area of 2.5 million people, and a gigantic sighting above that city that lasted not for a split second, but for 106 minutes. Now, what does that tell us? Are they trying to, what are they trying to do? Are they trying to provoke us?
Well, I don't claim to be an expert on that Arizona Triangle, but here's what I do know is, as you well know, Art, there have been literally thousands of sightings of this triangular craft worldwide,
yes,
going back to about 1990.